Thanks for watching part 1. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment on what you learned. Now, let's jump into the second part of this captivating real-life story. As Chief Stanley Okonkwo stepped out of the sleek, black car that had driven him from the airport. The dust of the city, the familiar scents, and the chaotic energy of Lagos greeted him like an old friend. But there was a new heaviness in his heart, a reminder of the years that had passed since he had last set foot in this city. As he made his way into the mansion that had stood as a symbol of his success for years, his mind wandered back to the past, the memories of a young man filled with ambition, love, and dreams of a happy family. But those dreams had been shattered when his wife had left him, taking not just his wealth, but also his peace of mind. Now, years later, he was back, determined to see his son, Kelvin, and perhaps offer him some wisdom before he made the same mistakes he had made. Kelvin had been eagerly waiting for his father's return. It had been years since he last saw him, and during that time, he had been preoccupied with his relationship with Rose and his ever-growing business empire. When his father entered the living room, Kelvin stood up, his face filled with excitement. "Dad, you're finally back," Kelvin said, his voice full of warmth as he embraced his father. Chief Stanley, despite his reserved nature, smiled softly. He was pleased to see his son, though he noticed the changes in him. The young man before him was no longer the boy who once looked up to him in awe. Kelvin had grown into a man of his own, and the wealth and success had shaped him in ways Chief Stanley wasn't entirely sure were for the best. "I'm glad to be back, son," Chief Stanley said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "There's much to discuss." They sat together, catching up on the events of the past few months. Kelvin told his father about the new ventures he was managing, the companies he was expanding, and, of course, his relationship with Rose. As Kelvin spoke, Chief Stanley listened carefully, though his eyes were clouded with concern. So one night as they sat in the big sitting room after dinner, Kelvin sat on the couch next to his father, the television playing softly in the background, though neither man was truly watching it. They had just finished their dinner, and for a moment, there was a comfortable silence between them. "So, Dad," Kelvin began, breaking the quiet, "I've been meaning to tell you about someone special in my life. Her name is Rose. She's beautiful, smart, and kind. I really want you to meet her." Chief Stanley turned his gaze from the television to his son, raising an eyebrow. "Rose. Tell me more, son." Kelvin's face lit up as he talked about her. "She's different from anyone I've ever met. She works hard, she's ambitious, and she really cares about the people around her. I'm serious, Dad, she's the one. I want to invite her over for dinner soon, so you can meet her." The idea seemed to please Chief Stanley. "Wow, that's a good idea," he said, nodding. "I'll be happy to meet her." For a moment, it seemed like everything was falling into place. Kelvin could picture it, the dinner, the conversation, his father's approval of the woman he had chosen to be with. Everything was perfect. But just as they were settling into the moment, Chief Stanley's tone shifted. He paused the TV and turned to face his son with a more serious expression. "My son, do you know the story of your mother and me?" Chief Stanley asked, his voice soft but full of depth. "And why she divorced me and ran off with my money, leaving you and me alone when you were just 2 years old?" Kelvin, taken aback, nodded slowly. He had always known the basics of the story, the betrayal, the bitterness, but never had his father spoken so openly about it. Chief Stanley sighed, his eyes distant as memories flooded back. I met your mother when I was young, full of ambition and hope. She was beautiful, lively, everything I could have wanted. I thought she loved me, but I was wrong. Kelvin remained quiet, listening intently as his father continued. She pretended to love me, to want to be with me for who I was. But in the end, she was after something else: money, status, power. I had many friends who warned me, told me to be cautious, but I was blinded by love. She convinced me to marry her, and I believed her promises. Chief Stanley's voice faltered for a moment. But after we got married, she changed. She became someone I didn't recognize, someone who cared only about what I could give her. She took everything, including my peace of mind. Kelvin felt his heart ache for his father. Though he had always known that his mother had left them, the depth of the pain his father carried was a reality he had never fully understood. Your mother left when you were just a baby, Chief Stanley continued, his eyes now focused on his son. She took my money, my trust, and walked away from me. That's why I made a vow I would never marry again. No one would ever take advantage of me like she did. Kelvin's heart tightened. He had always known that his father carried a certain hardness in his heart, a wall built from years of disappointment. But hearing this, hearing his father's truth, made him understand a bit more about the man he had grown up with. My son, Chief Stanley said, his voice firm but filled with concern, I don't want you to make the same mistake I made. Don't rush into things. Marriage is different from relationships. You need to really understand who she is before you commit to her for life. Kelvin sat there in silence, processing his father's words. He had never heard his father speak about love or relationships this openly before. But, Dad, he said, I really love Rose. She's different. I've never felt like this about anyone before. Chief Stanley leaned forward, his eyes piercing into his son's. I'm not saying you shouldn't love her, Kelvin. What I'm saying is that you need to test her. See her for who she really is. I won't sit here and watch you make the same mistake I made. Kelvin felt a knot form in his stomach. What do you mean, Dad? How do you test her? Chief Stanley's expression hardened, a plan forming in his mind. I want to see how she reacts when things aren't perfect. I'll approach her not as your father, but as a beggar, someone poor, someone she might look down on. I want to see if she treats me with the same kindness you've talked about. You'll see her true heart when she thinks no one is watching. Kelvin recoiled at his father's suggestion. Dad, no. You can't do that. Why would you disguise yourself as a beggar? That's not necessary. Why go to such extremes to test her? I don't want her to think that's the kind of man you are. Chief Stanley's face softened. I'm not trying to hurt her, Kelvin. But I know from experience that a heartless woman will do anything to get what she wants, no matter who she steps on along the way. You need to know what kind of woman she is before you make such a big commitment. Kelvin was conflicted. But Dad, I don't want you to go through all that trouble. And the heat, the sun, it could harm your health. His father nodded, understanding his son's concern. You're right, son. I won't do it for too long. Just give me some time, and I'll find a way to do it that won't hurt anyone. The following day, Chief Stanley disguised himself as a poor street beggar. He sat in front of the company gate where Rose was managing. A crumpled umbrella above his head, a small wooden table in front of him, and a pair of shoes laid out for repairs. His face was dirty, his clothes ragged. He sat under the hot sun, pretending to wait for work. He had dressed himself in ragged clothes, his face unshaven and covered in dust, his demeanor completely different from the powerful businessman he had been just days before. He was here for one reason, to watch Rose. The company gates were busy as usual, employees coming and going, cars honking in the chaotic rhythm of the city. Chief Stanley observed it all carefully, though his eyes were always on the young woman who now walked into his son's empire like she owned it. Rose, once the kind-hearted girl he had heard so much about, now seemed like someone entirely different. Rose strutted through the gates, head held high, her posture regal, her every movement commanding attention. The expensive clothes she wore only amplified the arrogance in her demeanor. She carried herself like a queen in her own right, untouchable, unreachable. The transformation was jarring. The woman Kelvin had spoken about with admiration, who had once been humble and caring, now walked past people without a second glance. She didn't acknowledge anyone as she passed by, no greetings, no smiles. It was as if they were invisible to her. Chief Stanley's heart tightened. He watched as Rose entered the building without sparing a single person a moment of her time. Later in the day, as Rose came out of the building to inspect the company's operations, her mood seemed darker than before. A young employee, a woman, was standing in the company parking lot, nervously clutching her notebook, looking at Rose as she approached. She had a report in her hand, but as soon as Rose looked at her, the young woman's shoulders tensed. "Rose, ma'am, I have the report you requested on the project," the employee began, but Rose cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Don't you see I'm busy?" Rose snapped, her voice cold and commanding. "What are you standing around for? Don't waste my time with that nonsense." The woman's face turned pale, and she lowered her head, biting back tears. Chief Stanley winced as he watched the young woman quickly walk away, her eyes downcast, defeated. It stung him to see such cruelty. Rose had been kind to her workers once, but now, she treated them as if they were beneath her. As Rose entered her car, she shouted at one of the drivers who was a few seconds late in starting the engine. "Can't you do anything right?" she yelled, her voice full of disgust. "What good are you? You're just wasting my time." The driver, his head hanging in shame, nodded without saying a word, his face flushed with embarrassment. The next morning, as Chief Stanley sat again in his spot by the gate, he noticed a frail, elderly woman slowly walking across the street, a heavy bundle in her arms. She was clearly struggling, her step slow, and her face lined with age and fatigue. She was making her way to the company's gate, trying to cross before the cars began moving too quickly. But Rose, in her usual rush, was already pulling out of the parking lot. Rose's car sped towards the gate, her face hard, her eyes sharp. As she approached the elderly woman, the car slowed down, but not enough for the woman to cross safely. The old woman, trembling with age, tried to hurry, but she couldn't keep up with the pace. Just as she stepped in front of Rose's car, Rose slammed on the horn, the harsh sound cutting through the morning air. "Move out of the way, you old fool!" Rose shouted through the window. "Can't you see I'm in a hurry?" The elderly woman froze, startled by the shout, her hands shaking as she stood still, unsure whether to keep walking or to step back. Rose, not bothering to wait, honked again, then sped past her. The elderly woman stumbled and nearly fell as Rose's car passed so close to her, the wind from the speeding car almost knocking her off balance. Rose didn't even glance in the rearview mirror to check if the woman was okay. Chief Stanley's blood began to boil. He had been watching this unfold for days, but this was the breaking point. As he sat under the sun, his eyes stayed fixed on the entrance, waiting, watching. And then it happened again. Rose's car screeched to a halt in front of the gate, and the elderly gatekeeper, a man who had worked for the company for years, struggled to open the heavy gate. The old man's movements were slow, his joints stiff from age. He had always been reliable, always opening the gate in time, but today, his age caught up with him. Rose got out of the car, her heels clicking harshly against the ground. She was furious, her face twisted with anger. "Are you trying to make me late?" she screamed at the elderly man. "How many times do I have to tell you to be quick? You're useless." Without warning, she slapped the old man across the face. The sound of the slap echoed in the air, sharp and cruel. The man staggered back, his face reddening, tears welling in his eyes. He stood there, stunned, too shocked to say anything. The workers nearby watched in silence, too afraid to step in, too fearful of losing their jobs. Chief Stanley watched in disbelief. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. This was not the woman Kelvin had described to him. This was not the kind-hearted woman he had hoped for his son. Rose had become someone else, someone he didn't recognize, someone who was willing to hurt others to get her way. Each act of cruelty, each slap, each dismissive word from Rose chipped away at the image Chief Stanley had formed of her. He had heard so much about how wonderful she was, but now, seeing it for himself, the truth was undeniable. It pained Chief Stanley to witness this. He had hoped for the best for his son, but as the days passed, it became clear that Rose wasn't the woman Kelvin believed her to be. And so, Chief Stanley waited, watching from afar, letting his son see for himself. He knew that he couldn't intervene just yet, not until Kelvin had seen the truth with his own eyes. His plan was set into motion, but it was becoming harder to stay silent. Every day, Rose's actions grew more unbearable to watch. He had to do something, but he couldn't reveal his hand just yet. Chief Stanley sat by the swimming pool at his sprawling mansion, a glass of fine red wine in his hand. The warm evening air drifted lazily around him, carrying the faint sounds of the city in the distance. But inside his mind, there was nothing but strategy. He knew the importance of the test he was about to set in motion, but a small, lingering question remained in his thoughts. How would he execute it? As Chief Stanley sipped his wine, his mind whirled with possibilities. He had watched Rose closely over the past few days, seen her arrogance, her mistreatment of the people around her. And while he had hoped to see the woman his son had described, he had instead witnessed the cruelty she had shown to the workers, to the elderly gatekeeper, and even to the beggar she had humiliated. He could no longer stand idly by. But how could he test her? Who would be the victim in this scenario? He looked out at the shimmering pool, deep in thought. Then, like a flash of inspiration, the perfect idea struck him. Something dangerous, but undeniably effective. He smiled to himself, a plan beginning to take shape. The next day, Chief Stanley drove into the bustling heart of the city, heading to a marketplace known for its wide range of goods. He knew exactly what he needed. His steps were confident, his mind focused on his goal. After a brief search, he found exactly what he was looking for: red heels, a symbol of both fashion and pride. He purchased the heels, their bright color standing out against the rest of the items in the market. He wasn't concerned about their design or their price. What mattered was what they would represent: a test of character. As soon as he returned home, Chief Stanley wasted no time. He sat at the dining table, the heels in front of him. With a steady hand, he carefully began to work on them. The tools he had used in the past, sharp, precise, were now turned to a more delicate task. He removed the sole of one of the heels, careful not to damage the delicate structure. Using a bit of super glue, he applied a thin layer to the bottom. The glue would hold the heel together for a short time, but it would break apart with just a few steps. It was the perfect setup. Rose would wear the shoes, thinking everything was fine, only to discover that they would fail her when she needed them most. This, Chief Stanley thought, would be the perfect test of her character. It would expose the truth that she had hidden behind her beauty and charm. He carefully glued the sole back, ensuring that the shoes looked just as they had when he first purchased them. When he was done, he packaged them up, ready to be given to Kelvin. That evening, Chief Stanley sat down with Kelvin, ready to tell him his decision. He had initially planned to carry out the test, but after careful thought, he realized something. He no longer needed to push Rose further. The woman she had shown herself to be was clear, and the test had already revealed her true character. Kelvin, eager to hear about the test, was surprised when his father approached him with a change of heart. "Son," Chief Stanley said, setting the package of red heels down on the table, "I've changed my mind." Kelvin, not expecting this, looked at his father, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean, Dad? I thought you were going to test Rose. What happened?" Chief Stanley's eyes softened. "I've seen enough, son. I don't need to test her any further. Her actions have already shown me the truth. She's not the woman you think she is." Kelvin was taken aback. "So, the test, it's over?" "Yes," Chief Stanley replied, his voice firm but gentle. "There's no need for it anymore. The test has already been failed." Kelvin looked down at the package, the weight of the moment sinking in. He couldn't understand what his father had seen that he hadn't. "But, she's everything I've ever wanted." "How can you say that?" Chief Stanley paused, his gaze steady on his son. "Because I've been there, Kelvin. I've seen the signs, and I know when someone is pretending to be something they're not. She's playing a game, and you're falling for it." Kelvin sighed deeply, torn between his love for Rose and the nagging feeling in the pit of his stomach. "I want to believe in her, Dad. But I don't know what to do now." Chief Stanley placed a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "Just take your time, son. The truth will always come out." Chief Stanley handed Kelvin the pair of shoes. "Take this to Rose, tell her about my return, and invite her for dinner. But tell her to wear the shoes when she meets me. I want to see how she reacts." Kelvin, confused and somewhat skeptical, looked at the red heels. "Dad, this seems strange. I don't remember you ever mentioning red shoes before." His father smiled cryptically. "Just trust me, son. It's the only way to know her true heart." Meanwhile, Kelvin, aware of his father's deep reservations about Rose, knew that revealing Chief Stanley's return too early would raise questions he wasn't ready to answer. The test had already begun the moment his father returned to the country, and now, everything would unfold at dinner. When Kelvin finally broke the news to Rose just 2 days before, she had been ecstatic. "Babe," he had said, his tone warm but casual, "I have great news. My dad returned to Nigeria just 2 days ago. He's back from his trip to the States." Rose's eyes widened with excitement. "Really? I can't believe it. I've been waiting to meet him." Kelvin smiled, his heart heavy with the weight of the situation. "He's asked me to bring you over for dinner tomorrow night. He wants to chat with you about us." He's eager to meet you and get to know you better, especially since you're going to be my wife.